with all these talks of international relations and what is happening with the new president in America, their dollar strengthening, what's happening to our dollar? That is the discussion tonight. Our guest this evening, our analyst this evening, is senior trader at JMMB, Andre Reid. Welcome, Andre.
Hi, Kalila.
How are you?
I'm good. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I remember, and it feels like not long ago, we were talking about the dollar wine and the dollar grind and all that stuff when, you had rapid devaluation of the Jamaican dollar. These days, it's been a bit more stable, although we
Yes.
have seen some slides, especially since COVID. Uh, Give us an overview of where the dollar is at, like over the past year, and then afterwards we'll get into what the forecast is.
Okay. What a forecast. So what we've seen over the past couple of months is that there has been moderate to strong demand. A lot of it seems to be coming from both aspects of the market. We'll talk about end users. End users usually are persons who are in the business of importation of goods and services. And usually, whenever there's any form of widening in terms of the gap of devaluation, the BOJ actually intervenes to satisfy that demand. Their intervention is through an auction system. It's called B-Fixed auction system. Usually the auction, I don't know, they don't usually give us a specific number ahead of time. Usually on the day, if they're intervening, you'll know what that number is. But year to date, they've actually intervened with a total of just about 200, well, 100, 230 million, sorry. And that is probably in line with market expectations, because
Year
once you
to date,
find
we
that
said, so since January.
since January, that's over 7 different intervention periods.
That that sounds like a lot. Is it
It
a lot?
is.
You need to give us some context.
Well, to be fair, the market trades, that is somewhere about 12 point something percent of the trading volumes year to date. So as it stands now, it might seem a little bit alarming, but once we go further down in the year, when we'll end up with maybe revaluation in between, they will actually be staying out of the market. Because the truth is, what the BOJ really wants is for orderly movement in the currency. They've actually been intervening on the other side too, if there is a need where we actually end up with revaluation that is too rapid. So in any direction, what the BOJ would want to see is orderly movement, more towards the upside, I would say as well, because coming out of the December period when we would have gotten a bit of revaluation, and it is customary that we get either reduced pressure on the currency or revaluation in this December period, as you have remittance inflows coming in during that time. What I'd probably want to present too is that normally during the first quarter of the calendar year ending on March, what you'll find is that the movement overall in the currency is usually a little bit lower than the other two quarters, Q2 and Q3. Reason being, once you get to the March period, when a lot of companies actually have to be paying taxes in Jamaican dollars. We've had the discussion, I've heard about it, the asset taxes, you have the regular corporate taxes that actually pay. That means that a lot of Jamaican dollars flows out of the system during that time. So even though BOJ intervened, and it seems like a pretty big number at this point, once we get to the March period, we expect that pressure might ease a little bit, because at that time most institutions would actually be handling Jamaican dollars. We may see a slight pickup when you get to closer into the summer months, because usually you find that some amount of demand, and it can come from both segments, where you find that businesses are actually looking to ramp up inventories. Maybe we'll be back to school, and then after back to school, we're talking about the December shelf products, right? So usually you get the movements between the Q2 and Q3, and then we end up with revaluation around Q4. So there's a lot of talk about the movement. To be fair, it is not the worst that we've seen, and the fact that the BOJ has actually been able to to intervene and actually defend the currency at regular intervals is something that we probably should be looking back in previous years and wonder, well, not maybe not necessarily wonder, but acknowledge that we've actually come a far way, because there was points in between where I don't know if anybody would go out on a limb and say it, but it's difficult to see the BOJ intervening with $230 million over the space of 2 months without expressing concern that the NIR is being depleted significantly. Now we're at 5 point something billion dollars, which equates to I think around 41 weeks of importation of goods. So I'm not exactly alarmed by the movement. I'm happy that the BOJ is able to consistently intervene in the market to provide for especially the goods and services, because remember too that when you talk to a lot of the economists, they're always going to talk about the fact that inflation or the exchange rate has a pass-through effect on inflation. Now, if it is that the exchange rate devalues beyond a certain point, then that number filters into the inflation number, and it becomes an even more difficult task for the BOJ to be looking to cut interest rates as it actually has been trying to embark on since the latter part of last year. Looking forward, it's not exactly a difficult space to maneuver. As I said, there is enough NIR to consistently defend the currency, and I think that especially in terms of the portfolio move that we may see, because remember that a lot of the financial institutions are somewhat regulated in terms of the exposure of their portfolio that they can actually hold in US dollars. It is the other I don't want to call them unregulated, but they're not necessarily bounded by the rules of the Bank of Jamaica and the FSC. Those are the institutions that perhaps will look to maybe position portfolios that would be in US dollars and might actually add a little bit of pressure to the currency. We're not at a point where the uncertainty in the economy or even the global financial landscape has gotten worse to the point where people are just looking to own US dollars regardless of, because to be fair, US dollars and the US Treasury instruments are considered a safe haven. We're not seeing where that is a major impact on the market as yet. So, all in all, it's still a fairly decent space that we're operating in, because we've had devaluation of much beyond the 2 to 3% that our analysts will always talk about. We can go back to '08, which is an anomaly, of course. We I think in 2021 there was also double-digit devaluation as well. So to be talking about maybe just 0.73% movement year to date is not exactly a bad position to be in. Because calendar year to date, I think we're at 1.13% in terms of devaluation compared to last year, 2024, which is 1.63%. So if we're just looking at it comparatively in terms of percentage movement, this year is still much better than last year, because even for the fiscal year to date movement, 2.25% depreciation as opposed to 4.35% year to date. So I mean, while the dollar movement might seem a little bit much percentage wise, which is where a lot of people would want to put the gauge, it's still a little bit more favorable than in previous
Because
years.
I remember a couple months ago, we were very close to hitting the 160 mark.
160.
And I feel
Right.
like that's a psychological barrier that
It is.
when it does hit that mark, people will take note. And I saw the BOJ intervened right before that.
Absolutely. So we've seen where the BOJ actions have actually caused a revaluation in the currency, and I think even the market players right now, they once you trade beyond a certain level, once you see any type of movement in the currency beyond a certain level, it's almost a given to look to see if there's going to be any BOJ intervention. Even if there is some amount of trading, you'll find that it will be cautious increments that people will be trading in, as opposed to blocks of maybe 1 to 2 million or even 5 million trades. It would be more in the hundreds of thousands of blocks that you'll see changing hands, because you really don't want to be that guy that gets caught holding 160 money, and end up with some amount of revaluation.
question coming from Roswell online. Roswell wants to know how long can BOJ intervene in the market? We don't print USD. One analyst states 5 billion US may not last for 2 years if the demand continues to be strong with low inflows.
Well, I mean, the BOJ has demonstrated that it has the capacity to do that. I don't necessarily want to act as if I know what the central bank exactly will do, but we know what the mandate is. Yes, we operate in a floating currency, and that actually means that they will always be having a need to interact with the market, whether it be through intervention by selling foreign exchange, or even the side of moral suasion as is necessary. So and there are always funds coming in to actually replace those outflows. May not necessarily be to the exact magnitude, but to look at it in absolute terms is probably not the best way to look at it, because we're not exactly tracking where the inflows are coming from. So if I had a handle on that side, then maybe we'll be speaking a different language. But I don't know, especially given last year, because last year it was like almost 1.1 billion dollars of intervention. That turned out to be somewhere about 5 point something percent of the overall market trading. So 200 million is still a smaller percentage of the 1.1 that we saw
Yeah, but that's
last year.
200 million, and we're only a month and a half into 2025. If you continue at the same pace, it's going to be a lot more than the 1.1 billion.
True, but it's not reasonable to assume that the pace will always be the same. I did mention that usually when you get around the March period, there will be demand for the Jamaican currency, which means that that pressure on foreign exchange is likely to reduce. In fact, what you might see is that some institutions may actually have to sell US dollars to pay their Jamaican dollar obligations. So, over those, I mean, between late February, early March, we might actually see where the pressure might ease a little bit as well. And then now we get into the December period, which usually we end up with either revaluation or some amount of stability. So, I mean, I'm not going to expect it's unreasonable to expect that it's going to be a straight line up to 160.
Strong Link wants to know, is the NIR gaining or declining year to date?
The last number I saw was an increase. The last number I saw was an increase.
Good stuff. Good to know.
Okay.
Before you go, Andre, a different topic. This is a great discussion on the dollar. Actually, before I change the topic, do you think that where we are now at 157 something to 1 US, that is a true value of the Jamaican currency? It's a big
Ah,
hypothetical theoretical
so
question to throw at you.
so remember that it's
I know countries
there.
like China, they're always accused of undervaluing their currency for trade purposes and whatnot. Where we are
No.
now,
So,
is that
so
something that a consideration that we ought to have?
well, for us, remember that we have a rate that is largely determined by market, right? So you find that it's prices that are usually determined by buyers and sellers. It's not like in other countries where there is fixed or as you might have mentioned, cases of perceived manipulation of the currency. I think what the BOJ does is to ensure that there is enough to satisfy, especially the goods and services that are needed for regular citizens, and not throw the whole inflation number out of whack, if I can say that word, right? But the point I'm trying to make is that where we are is a price determined largely by market. So in my estimation, it would have been somewhat fair.
Okay. All right. I just got a note from my producer, so I won't change the topic on what I wanted to ask you about something else, but it's
Well,
all
let's
right.
talk about stocks or equities.
Yeah.
So to be fair, I mean, I
No,
don't want to
it
get
was a
into
very
specifics.
specific thing that I wanted to ask you about. So, but I'll
Uh,
leave that for
uh,
another time.
okay.
Right. All right. So we're fairly stable now. I said learn, grow, invest as stable-ish. And do you
Stable.
expect that that is going to continue for the rest of the year? And when if and when we do hit 160, what impact is that likely to have?
Usually when you end up with these psychological markers, the market's perception changes somewhat. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why we have not seen where trading or even the weighted average actually closes above that level as yet. There will be small pockets where you find that rates are much higher than what is the reported weighted average. But um, for me, I think that if we get beyond that number, the market probably will be more somewhat cautious in their approach. I don't think it's going to be panic, that the world is ending kind of thing. Because to be fair, the BOJ will actually be continuing to ensure that there is stability in the market. I don't think we'll get to the point of other countries, without calling names, that are having struggle trying to find currency for sorry, for their citizens to use, and actually
I
some
thought you were going. I
institutions.
thought you were going to cough and say the name.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. But yeah, you've seen where they have been largely restricted, and we are no at this point nowhere near that kind of situation.
Okay, well, that's good to know. So, stable-ish being the word of the
Ish.
day, I would say.
Ish.
Thank you for
And
that.
to be fair though, Kalila, coming from double digits down to 2 to 3, maybe even 4%, it's still not as bad as we were before. So I'd say very stable coming from where we were. I mean, '08 is a crisis period. December, I mean, 2021, 2021, that would have been the pandemic, again, somewhat panic setting. But to be fair, it's not as bad as we would have seen in prior years.
Yeah. Thanks, Andre. Much appreciated.